Breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ from college football. Nebraska closing in on hiring Matt Rhule as its next head football coach. Our partners at 24/7 Sports confirmed. There are details to be ironed out, and a deal likely won't be finalized for a couple of days. Now, Rhule was fired last month by the Carolina Panthers in his third season in charge, but he has a strong pedigree in college with successful stints at both Temple and Baylor. The Cornhuskers are banking on Rhule, bringing them back to prominence after the disappointing Scott Frost era. He was fired back in September. Let's bring in Barrett Sallee for some reaction to this. Barrett, start there. Your reaction to the prospect of Matt Rhule becoming the head coach at Nebraska.
Yeah, not terribly surprised. When Nebraska opened up, I think he was one of the first names that was bandied about. Now, at that time, he was still with the Carolina Panthers, so it was more of a dream rather than reality. And now that it's becoming reality, I think that he's a natural fit. He's a turnaround artist. He made Temple relevant. And then when he inherited Baylor, it was 1 year after the Art Briles issue. Now, obviously, Jim Grobe was there on an interim basis, but you could not pick a worse situation than what Baylor was in. And 3 years later, he was playing in the Sugar Bowl. So he's a turnaround artist. Obviously, he understands the recruiting footprint in the middle of the country. He has ties in Texas, although recruiting's not necessarily his strength. But I do think, and we've seen in the past, that he does tailor his offense to his skill set, his player skill set. And that's important because at Nebraska, a lot of times it seems like they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And I think with Rhule, the flexibility that he has offensively and the fact that he can tailor his scheme one way or the other is going to be very important moving forward. So I love the fit. I think Matt Rhule is a fantastic coach. Didn't work out at the NFL, but hey, if you're a Power 5 college football coach, that's your calling. It's a pretty nice way to live.
What does he bring to Nebraska that will be more successful than what he was able to do with Carolina, which was not a lot?
Well, I think it's his stability, his calm demeanor. There's not going to be as much pressure. I think, look, Nebraska, there's a lot of pressure anyway, but I think when Scott Frost was hired, Nebraska still thought that it was the 90s. I think after Scott Frost, his season and his career started to tail off, they started to realize, man, this is not the same kind of job that it was before. I think they understand now that since Matt Rhule's an outsider, they're going to give him a little bit more of a chance to frame the program the way it needs to be framed. And I think he likes to run the spread offense. He likes to move fast, but he also likes to pound the rock. He likes to spread it out lengthwise and then pound the rock inside. Read the box, so to speak. Let the quarterback make the decision. So I think he's a fit in terms of scheme, and I love the flexibility that he provides.
Given what happened with Scott Frost, I mean, 16-32 at Nebraska, fired early in the season after that 1-2 start. Mickey Joseph's been the interim since then. How much pressure is there on this Nebraska program to get this hire right?
Oh, there's a ton of pressure because they thought they got it right with Scott Frost. He was the golden child, and obviously that didn't work out so well. But I think the fact that a Big Ten West title isn't exactly a high bar is what's so frustrating for Nebraska, because it's not like they have to be Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia or Michigan. They just have to be average to slightly above average, and they've had a hard time doing that. So I think right now the patience wore thin with Scott Frost. But I think with Matt Rhule's history, they understand, hey, getting to a point where you're competitive, getting to a point where you're at least in the discussion for division title is something that he can attain rather quickly.
Barrett, you mentioned recruiting and the fact that, Rhule has some skill when it comes to that. Where's the Nebraska brand in terms of recruiting at this point?
It's not really anywhere, Jeremy. I think the fact that it's not the 1990s, it's hard for Nebraska to sort of wrap their arms around that. It's a 500-mile radius. There's no players there. There's no high school talent. So if you're Nebraska, these kids don't know Nebraska as a title contender. They don't even know Nebraska as a Big 12 team. We do because we're old dudes, but they don't know that. So I think from a recruiting standpoint, they have to make Nebraska great again. And right now, the reputation just is not there. It's something that Matt Rhule is going to have to get through to the administration once he's hired.
It's 4:30 on a Friday. I mean, this is typically when you get like your news dump. Obviously, this is a different Friday because of the fact it's Thanksgiving. But I mean, Deion Sanders in the news, possibly making a coaching move. Lane Kiffin, we've been talking about him for a couple of days now. So the Matt Rhule situation, I mean, what does it tell you about the timing of this particular thing coming to fruition here?
Well, I think this is something that's been in the works for a long time. Nebraska's playing Friday afternoon. So, I don't think there's any pressure to maybe like hide something like Auburn might be doing with Lane Kiffin or work something out down the road with Dion. Nebraska's playing right now. So after this afternoon, if they're going to go after Matt Rhule, there's no reason not to go after Matt Rhule right now. There's nothing they need to hide. So because he's unemployed right now, it's going to be a lot easier for them to sell it. So yeah, I mean, there are other situations, but this is sort of unique because Matt's not coaching anywhere. Nebraska's playing. So essentially, in 3 hours, we can have this thing wrapped up.
Yeah, they're taking on Iowa on this Black Friday. One last question for you, Barrett. I mean, assuming that the deal gets done, the details are ironed out, where this Nebraska program is right now, how far away are they from being a contender, not just in the Big Ten West, but in the Big Ten overall?
Big Ten overall, a long way away. This is not Ohio State. This is not Michigan. This isn't even Penn State. This isn't even in Wisconsin. I mean, this is a Nebraska team, a Nebraska program that is an afterthought. So I think the first things first, contend for the Big Ten West. That's not that high of a bar, but it's something that's been hard for them to attain at this point. But in terms of contending for the Big Ten title, I think it's almost impossible at this point. You have to first get to the division title, win multiple division titles, and then prove that you have the talent of Michigan or Ohio State. And they just don't have that right now.
Barrett Sallee joining us to discuss the breaking news. Nebraska closing out on hiring Matt Rhule as their next head football coach. Thanks for hopping on with us, Barrett. Appreciate it. And of course, for more on this hire, and we mentioned Deion Sanders, we mentioned Lane Kiffin possibly making coaching moves as well alongside the Matt Rhule situation, although the Matt Rhule situation might come to fruition a lot sooner. Check out the Cover 3 podcast. Barrett, Chip Patterson, Tom Fornelli, walking you through all the major storylines as the college football season wraps up. You can download and follow the Cover 3 wherever you get your podcast audio. You can also scan the QR code right now.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.